Thank you for all joining us for this session entitled MFA Nation. We're very happy you could be with us today as part of the 1455 Summer Festival, hosted by 1455 Literary Arts. My name is Karen Bender. I guess we'll all introduce ourselves.
Oh, I'm Robert Siegel.
I'm Sonia Scott.
Hi, I'm Daryl Wetter, and so I'm Canadian, and I'm recently back from directing a creative writing master's program in Asia, in which Robert Siegel has played a vital role.
Yeah, wonderful program.
And Sophronia is director.
I'm the director of the Alma College MFA in creative writing. So we are a fairly new program located in Alma, Michigan, about an hour north of Lansing.
I'm one of the instructors in the ALMA program, and I've taught at various MFAs around the country, including Hollins and Warren Wilson.
Yeah, I've taught at the Regis MFA. I helped start that program in Denver, Colorado. And I've also taught in the Bay Path MFA in creative nonfiction, which is solely online.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Interesting.
Great. And Robert?
Oh, I should add that I'm a professor at UNC Wilmington, which has an MFA in creative writing, and actually a BFA, a Bachelor of Fine Arts as well. I've taught continuing education at NYU and at the University of Iowa. So I think I've seen the creative writing world from a number of different angles, and we can talk about not just the MFA options, but perhaps the options outside of MFA world.
Yeah, I think we should also add, Karen and Rob and Daryl, that we are also all practicing writers. You know, that we teach, we administrate, we direct, but we are also producing our own creative writing.
Right. And that teaching and writing are really great interactions. They really support each other and nourish each other. At first, I thought maybe we could talk about what is an MFA. So maybe Sophronia and Daryl, since you both have directed, you could both discuss. Sophronia.
Yeah, well, it stands for Master of Fine Arts, and it is an advanced graduate degree. Some people may confuse it with the MA, which is a master's. And the master's program tends to be focused more on the research of an art, and it may even involve several arts, whereas a Master of Fine Arts works specifically on one area, creative writing for us, and it goes deeply into the practice. It is less research oriented and more the actual doing of the art. And when you graduate, there is usually a presentation of your work that you've developed throughout your time in the program. It's usually a 2-year program. There are MFAs that are full-time programs where you actually go and move to the school and you live there for 2 years. And you and I both work in low residency programs where you are only required to be present twice a year for residencies. Ours is a 10-day residency. And the rest of the time you're working one-on-one with a faculty mentor. Daryl, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, well, I'm going to clear things a little in that, so I'm Canadian and I'm recently back from 4 years directing a creative writing master's, but it was actually an MA, not an MFA, although its focus was absolutely on writing. So that was an MA in creative writing offered at LaSalle College of the Arts in Singapore, a set that is so interesting that it's featured in Westworld season 3. But the degree was actually conferred by Goldsmiths University of London. So that gave me exposure to the UK system as well. And in UK, and Goldsmiths' own degree is an master's degree in creative writing. It's an MA, not an MFA. And so actually one thing I want to do as the token non-American here is mention that the MFA in creative writing is, of course, an obsession in America, but it's fairly unique to America. So another contrast, so whereas, we've all presumably presented at AWP, and Australia has the Australasian Association of Writing Programs, where I was able to present for 3 years. And a couple of key facts about Australia is that, one, they don't have a lot of master's programs in creative writing. What they do have are doctoral programs in creative writing on every second street corner. So Australia has about 2/3 of Canada's English-speaking population, and at least 5 times the number of PhDs in creative writing. So if if you're an Australian, you don't do an MFA in creative writing, you do a PhD in creative writing. So that's interesting. But then also we have to remember that, so yes, like we know MFA versus NYC, they lay out all the stats of the rise of MFA programs in the States. And Mark McGurl's book, The Program Era, does that as a bar graph. And it's that rare moment where we can show all these Bean County administrators, look, an exponential market. But that market is actually really unique to the English language. So, and here's the shameless plug, in teaching creative writing in Asia, to which Robert's a wonderful contributor. I mentioned this fact that I didn't know until a chance chat at Goldsmiths. So in continental Europe, discounting the UK, creative writing is rarely taught, and it's rarely taught, and when it is taught, it's often taught in English. So for example, Spain has a population around 43 million compared to Canada's 26-ish million Anglophones. Depending on the generosity of one's accounting, Spain has about 1.5 master's degrees in creative writing. And similarly, France has, 60 million people, almost no master's programs in creative writing. And in Spain, this one school, the Escuela de, whatever the Spanish for creative, like the Writers' School of Spain, they're actually now trying to partner with English universities in England to actually grant what is, in practical purposes, an MFA in Spanish, in Spanish in Spain. And again, but they're also attracting so many people from Central America. So that's these are some really key distinctions. So the MFA, while the world's most popular university animal in the States, that is, in my experience, I hope it's not my experience. I think that is really unique to the US.
Yeah.
Well,
Fascinating.
I would add to that, that the MFA is considered a terminal degree in the United States. So right. You're supposed to not, this is the degree, you don't have to go beyond it. But there is a rise in the PhD, right? That is popular in Europe and in Australia, as you mentioned. And it seems like that could happen here, but it's slow. It seems to be slow in coming.
Yeah. Though I would add that I like to think of the MFA not as terminal, but chronic.
What do you mean by that, Robert?
Yes.
Professor Siegel.
It needn't be the end of you. You can get through it and manage the effects throughout your life with proper medication. And
well, what would we say are good things about MFAs? I know there's debate. What are things that either you got from your MFA or through teaching you think are good things?
Well, I'll start off. I got married.
Interesting. And
I met
so did I to you. So that was good.
But you met in your MFA program.
Yes.
We did. In a workshop. Which
goes to the heart of the matter. I think one of the great things that an MFA offers is community. For many people, and I think I was one of them, it's the first time you encounter your tribe. People with the same set of concerns, the same worries and drives, and it was enormously comforting. It was very exciting. I made friendships beyond meeting Karen and getting married eventually. I made friendships that have lasted an entire lifetime. So I think that's one great value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would totally agree. I remember being at our MFA program, and the head person, who was Frank Connery at the time, said, this is the most important work you will do, or something like that. And I guess I felt like that's so crucial, especially in this country where the arts and writing are so devalued, to be in a place where you feel like you're with your people, where people are taking writing seriously for a specific amount of time is so nourishing. You learn about who to read, you get feedback, you find people to love and to connect with in all different ways. And that is the gold of it. I really feel like, and you get craft, you learn about craft and things that help you along the way. But I know teaching at Alma, that's one thing that's so moving to me is, or other FATE programs too, but most recently in Alma, I just seeing how students were so happy to be in a place where other people felt the same. Like I remember this one student, we had one professor, Leslie Contreras-Schwartz, who said the Oxford English Dictionary was really important to her in her lecture, and she was talking about it. When the student said, same for me, and I can't talk to anyone about that. It was so moving. So, yeah.
Yeah, and actually though, and we do, I think it's really important to remember that not only is there that community that you're meeting constantly, both inside and around the classroom, but we actually learn by that community. And that's actually, remember, that's really, honestly, I'm not overrating our field. That is the key pedagogical revolution that creative writing really brings to the university, not just to the study of an art. So, big picture, remember that before the First World War, if you want to study literature at university, you studied it in Latin or Greek. It was the first revolution was to be able to study literature in the language that you order coffee in. And then after the Second World War, the second big revolution was, okay, instead of me just writing essays about novels and poems and plays, can't I write my own novels, poems, and plays? And that to me, and so I've also taught a lot of literature, and I think it is great in ways, but honestly, it's a lot of the idea of the expert prof nattering on in a lecture at the front of the room compared to the roundtable workshop. And so those teaching gems that when we find and when we realize, like, I can't believe I taught 18 years without this. So Ann Patchett, and so many of you are Iowa alumni, Ann Patchett has this beautiful essay called The Getaway Car. And she talks about the workshop experience. And her whole point is you learn a lot, not from when people love your story, but you learn a lot when that person across the room that you maybe not even don't like, and they point out a challenge in your story, and all your friends are, like, oh, they think it's great. And you recognize in your soul, oh no, my frenemy is correct. Or conversely, we learn a lot watching another student's text get put up on the hoist, like, oh, I don't think I'd have that 9-page dialogue. I think I'd probably cut that to 1.5. So that, peer stimulation, peer learning, peer critique, those to me are the things that I wish other disciplines did, where so much of the learning is just one-to-one prof. The prof is giving feedback on an assignment that the rest of the class doesn't see. In the writing workshop, the prof is usually giving feedback. A lot of that feedback is shared by the peers.
Yeah. It's really true.
So
I would also add that the craft element was hugely important for me. So I had already published a novel when I entered my MFA, but I like to tell people that it was like that novel was an airplane I built by myself in the garage, right? I knew it flew, but I didn't quite know why. But if I had some help, I could build a rocket. I know I could do like so many more things. And earning the MFA, learning the craft helped me to wield what I do with intention, right? And I talk about magic wands, like it's like Harry Potter. It's like, wait, I actually have a wand here. So it's like being able to, like, instead of just whipping this round around and throwing these words around, I can say, okay, this is what I'm trying to do, and I have the words to understand that. I know enough about books that I can say, oh, somebody else does this, and I can read them to help me do this. There's less white knuckling of it, when I come to a project anew, and that's what everything else you said, yes, community and the people I love come from my MFA programs, but in terms of my writing, it gave me a focus and an understanding of my work that I value hugely.
absolutely, yeah.
And I think another way to sum that up in a single word is acceleration. So again, and though I do want to flag, like, again, another issue that I think is unique to America. I'm talking about all these where I'm not talking about an $85,000 MFA from Columbia. So with that terror hanging over things, but acceleration, I think, is the one really powerful fact. Is, right, like, so we're all scribbling beforehand, we have aspirations and dreams, and then you need all the, like, I wish Daryl Wetter, the writer, had Daryl Wetter, the writing broth, because you need someone to say, like, okay, what is your genre? Here's how your genre works. No, you know how you've got the conflict buried on page 8 of a 9-page story? We're moving that to page 1. And so I think that acceleration, and that's the great joy when you see people who haven't published, want to publish, they come in and then they start publishing. And again, in publishing, it's not the only validation to writing, but that acceleration is so much quicker. Yes, you can, like as Sophronia said, you can build it in your garage by trial and error, but it takes a lot longer than going to the shop.
Yeah.
I would add too the word demystify, because I felt like there were a lot of myths that I had heard about writing, like you're hit by lightning and you're a genius and you write it out, and and I was like, I'm not doing that. Am I a writer? What am I doing? And to see that writers work hard, and the tools and craft, as you say, Sophronia, just the tools that you need to build your house, basically, or build what you're building, is so comforting.
And I think I like to think of workshop as being in that shop, like Daryl mentioned, like, here is the thing that we're trying to build, and we're all standing around looking at this, and someone says, well, maybe you need a new kind of carburetor in this, like, or have you tried a different kind of fuel, right? Yeah, let's do that. Let's, somebody, bring in the wrench, let's take this apart. And it feels organic and helpful, and that this thing that you're building is somehow really, really going to work because of the input of so many.
Exactly. What about warnings? What do you want to be careful? You'd mentioned the $85,000 debt, which I'll just jump in and say, don't go into debt if you can. That is just, there is no money to be had. I mean, I think that, who knows? I mean, I think it's one of these things where it is very unpredictable with writing, and it's hard, I think, to think of it as a career, as a financial thing is complicated, very complicated. I think MFAs need to be very clear about that, and often are not. But I would say first is just don't go into debt. And then I also think I would research MFAs and think where you would be a good fit in terms of your own personality and your work, because they differ a lot.
How would you do that research?
Good question. I would say, well, I mean, one thing I did is I applied to places, I visited them. You talk to students there, and you see if they're kind of on the same wavelength. Do you want students that are, super like competitive and rigorous? Do you want ones that are maybe more nurturing? What genre does the school embrace? Some are a little more focused on one type, sort of thing.
You can also contact the school. I mean,
right.
I will pick up the phone and call you if you want information about the program. Let's have a conversation about it. There's also, I created this document that's on our website. I don't know if you've ever seen it, Karen. It's called your MFA Decision Journal. And it's just this simple workbook to help you think about these things. Why do you want this degree? What are you willing to change in your life about it? Do you have the support? Just because I feel that yes, that research piece is important, but sometimes people don't know what to ask. Right? They don't know why they want this thing, and it could be simply because I want it. I don't know. But you have to ask these questions of yourself to help you understand what you're getting into.
Yeah.
I'd say another warning, and again, I would say, I would generally say, yeah, don't pursue the $85,000 MFA. But one sad fact, or one real fact, is that great writers are not necessarily great writing teachers, and that was a big lesson for me, right? So for example, your favorite writer isn't necessarily going to be the best writing prof for you. I'd like to think we're past the bad old days of male lech profs using their workshop to hit on their female students. I hope we're past that. But I still find there's a fair bit of Wild West when it comes to creative writing pedagogy. I mean, it's very easy to wind up with a prof who's just like, well, this is what I do, man. And I find that approach isn't necessarily great. So, we're all talking about students who've been online their whole lives. So I would try to get some Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter dirt on how your profs teach. So if you're thinking of schools X, Y, and Z, first of all, you need to make sure that the profs you're really hoping to work with are not going to be on leave when you're there paying a lot of money to be there. Because, and the school should let you know who's got leave coming up, a sabbatical, et cetera. But I would try to find out how they teach, or for example, like it works with most students, but I do teach the short story as being a conflict-driven genre. And I find that that's really, to me, it's foundational. I contextualize it as foundational. I say, like, once you learn this, yes, you can do other things. But for example, like when I do meet the students who like, I don't know, it's not poetry, it's not prose, I'm reinventing the wheel. I know I'm not a great fit for that student because, I don't feel they're going to publish. I don't think they're going to get those sort of calling card publication credits and stories that they can shop around that I think will accelerate their careers. So I would say if you can sniff around to try to hear about the teaching.
Smart.
Maybe sit in on a class.
I agree. There's and we did that this past residency. We had an open house day where students can visit and sit in on the lectures. Because I do think that's important. And I will also add that I agree with Daryl that great writers aren't necessarily, not everyone are great teachers. And I've just experienced that as a student. And in gathering the faculty for the Alma MFA, that was a huge concern of mine, that my faculty, first and foremost, were great teachers. And I wanted to offer that to our students first and foremost. That's a huge priority for me, and that's why I have Karen. But I always think of Magic Johnson, right? Because I'm a sports person, right? Magic Johnson's fantastic basketball player. Grew up shooting baskets in his driveway hundreds of times a day, but as a coach, he can't do it, right? He cannot relay, this is how you become a great basketball player. So I'm looking for the non-Magic Johnsons.
Let's see. What else would you look for maybe when you're looking for an MFA, or do you need an MFA? Thoughts? Why would you need an MFA, and when would you not, maybe?
Is there a certain kind of writer who would actually do better outside of the MFA system? It's an interesting question.
Well, so I'm a multi-genre writer, so I'm not, doing anything for my team or house here. But of course, so often fiction is the favored child of graduate writing programs, right? So yes, poetry is wonderful, and I publish poetry. Memoirs are increasingly relevant, but so often fiction gets maybe drives a program. But it's always fascinating as well, though. To what degree are short stories and novels the same genre in different genres, right? And so some people excel at the short story and cannot write novels, and some people can write amazing novels but not short stories. And I think you have to anticipate that in ways, I think, even at the MFA level, even with theses, that the programs do tend to favor the short story, in that, because you can work on complete texts and you can revise them substantially. So like if you look at a writer like Kirsten Chen, so she wrote MFA short stories that she published in journals that got her the attention of an agent, and now she's publishing novels. So The Counterfeit is, she has a new novel that's really hot, like literally just about a week and a half old, about counterfeit handbags in Asia. And so Kirsten, like so many of us, wrote short stories in graduate school and then went on to write novels and essentially stopped writing short stories, presumably because of market pressures, et cetera. But so, there are programs where I think, is there enough time for you to be writing a big enough chunk of a novel? That'd be another one I would say. Like, does this program allow me to submit, or how many words of a novel will I be submitting for my thesis? If it's only 20,000, whereas another program allows you to submit 60, I'd go to the one where you can submit 60. If you feel like you're a long distance runner, that the novel's your genre.
I think that's a good point. I know that at UNCW, we have a long form workshop specifically for book length work. And if you consider yourself a novelist, first and foremost, you might look for a program that offers something like that. And I know other places have it as well. Whereas if you're you're working in multiple genres, you might want a program that encourages a multi-genre approach. Karen and I both taught at Hollins University in Virginia, where workshops were all multi-genre. So knowing a little bit about what you're looking for as a student might help you match the curriculum to your own sort of desires.
And I would say to be open in terms of genre, because in low residency programs, you may have the option to dip your toe into a different genre or even get a dual genre degree. And I say this from personal experience because when I started my MFA, I went there to study fiction and that was my only thought. But in sitting in lectures on poetry and in conversations with the other students and faculty that I met, it was suggested to me, well, you could be writing essays as well, which didn't make sense to me because I'd spent my career as a journalist and I was thinking I'm done with that. And I didn't even know what the phrase creative nonfiction meant, right? That sounds like something that would have gotten me fired in my so what is that? But it turned out to be such I became a dual genre student, so I have my degree in both, and I've written in both. I've written 3 books of nonfiction and 2 novels since then. And I just keep thinking about these nonfiction books and how they would not exist if I had not been open to someone saying, maybe you should try this because you could be good at that. Right. And I just think, don't go into an MFA with a closed mind.
So you may want a program where you have an opportunity to cross genres or surprise yourself.
Yeah.
Some programs have the genres, siloed and they're closed to.
Right.
Again, another thing to look at. Yeah,
no, I remember I wanted to take a poetry class when I was at Iowa and I was not allowed to.
Yeah, I don't know if that's, we went a long time ago.
We went a long time ago, so maybe it's changed. Maybe
it's hard to imagine that any program would enforce that kind of rule anymore.
I don't know, but I think you want to find out, it could be on class size or something, different programs have different rules, so right, you want to think about that.
The other thing I would add, if you're interested in teaching, it seems to me, and you guys, correct me if I'm wrong, so many job applications want you to teach in 2 different genres. Right.
Nowadays, yes.
Yeah, right. So have that experience.
Plus, juggle.
Yeah. Sweep
up after class.
God.
Flip burgers in the cafeteria.
Well, maybe that's an interesting question. Post MFA, what does an MFA enable you to do or not?
That's an important question, a powerful question. I like to tell students that it doesn't stop you from doing anything. And that's the important thing.
Yeah.
But it used to be, primarily a teaching degree that allowed you entree to the MFA teaching world. And that's gotten more complicated simply as that world has gotten more crowded. Number of jobs as academia changes, the number of jobs has steadily fallen. Number of tenure track jobs has fallen. This has gotten a great deal of coverage in the press.
What are other things? Oh, so I guess what can you do after an MFA?
Well, one difference that we should think about is that with a full-time MFA or traditional MFA, you would get teaching experience. Because you would be at a school with an undergraduate population, and you would probably be teaching classes, which is an experience you wouldn't necessarily get in a low-res MFA. Now, for the ALMA MFA, there are aspects of teaching. So you have to create a critical thesis and deliver it as a lecture. And we would like to start some postgraduate programming that would work on teaching skills. So that would be a separate thing, possibly a certification that you would get after you graduate. But that's something to think about, that if you are focused in teaching, make sure you enter a program that will get you those teaching skills.
Yeah, very important point. Though, I know informally from just talking to my own MFA students, recent alumni, they're increasingly looking elsewhere for work after graduation. It's understandable. Academia lags in terms of pay. It lags in terms of benefits and job protections. Geographically, it can be complex and difficult. Sort of a constellation of small institutions spread often in odd places. And they're doing very well because it turns out that the MFA gives students skills that are useful in all sorts of different contexts. Marketing, corporate communications, digital marketing, arts administration.
Editorial.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think this is where at least anecdotally, I'm seeing the growth among my own students.
That's great.
Yeah, I like the fact that they have options. I think there was a period there of some years when there was a real squeeze as people didn't quite understand, since the degree started as a teaching degree, there was a time lag and people didn't quite understand what else it could be used for. And it's a relief to see that it actually gives all sorts of great language related skills that can be used creatively in the job market.
I think I saw that recently, that a company was looking for MFA students in their communications and in advertising, because they wanted someone who could tell the story of the company,
Right.
Constantly tell the story of their products, because when you think about it, I mean, the best marketing is a story, right? And you're engaged in the story. So why not hire writers to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. People can actually tell a story effectively.
Let me think, what else?
Well, I'm curious about the world outside the MFA. If somebody takes a look at the MFA world and says, I don't think it'll work for me for this reason or for that reason. And yet I want to learn about craft, taking advantage of some formal structures. I don't want to just work in my garage. What are the options? And how do they compare?
Well, I mean, I know, so actually both you and I, Robert, teach at the Iowa Summer Writing Festival online, which is like, there are a lot of online classes there, or also Catapult and many, Grub Street, many places where you can take online classes, which often are a prequel to an MFA. Students will take those classes and get prepared and then apply to an MFA, or it can be good in themselves in creating, communities online I also work as a mentor in a program called Bookends through SUNY Stony Brook, which is a year-long program where often actually post-MFA students or students who don't go to MFAs turn in a draft and work with a mentor over a year to work on a book. So, but it's a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Conferences.
Yeah.
Places like, and some of the places you mentioned, like Grub Street, are in a community, right? Like I've taught at the Loft in Minneapolis, and they have a huge writers program with all sorts of teachers, and you could learn any aspect of writing you want in a program like that. You also have, I know I've worked with the Collegeville Institute, which is also in Minnesota, and they have residencies, and they have something called the Emerging Writers Program, where it's an application process, and you have mentors who lead a workshop, but then you're responsible for writing 4 essays over the course of the next year, and you're mentored in that. So I think you're right, Karen, in that these can be prequels to an MFA, because I know we've had students come to Alma who just felt like they had exhausted those pieces and felt that they were ready for the next. They wanted a deeper dive and more focused attention on their work, and that's where the MFA came in.
Yeah.
It is true that the MFA offers a certain kind of continuity over the course of however many years. Some programs are 2, some are 3. You continue with a group of peers, a stable group of professors, and you move from class to class together, and there is a value to that. Alternatively, online classes, local workshops, they have a certain sort of opposite value too, I think. Just sort of the shot in the arm approach. When you get stuck, then you sort of go to the well and get some additional teaching. And I've had students over the years who are using that approach, and it seems to work for them too.
Meaning that when they need a shot in the arm, they go into a group. Is that what you
Yeah,
mean? Okay.
yeah. Exactly. When they reach sort of the limit of what they know how to do, and they figure, I need a little more guidance, they take a class, and and then they use that, take it away, come back when they need more. For a certain type of writer, it seems to work very well.
Yeah, I would say such a writer is self-motivated and focused in terms of knowing something about their craft, and aware enough to know, I have a hole here. I'm trying to do something, and I don't know how to do it, and can go seek that out specifically.
Yeah, I think that's
can get stuck and then just not write for months because they have no idea why they're stuck.
Oh, that reminds me of when I was younger and went to an MFA, because, you know, I had a project, I was in the middle of it. I felt like I was spending my life reinventing the wheel. I was a passionate reader, but I could only go so far in imitation or recreating what I had read on the page. I could get some things, and I was like, oh, this is what, just like the books I love. But then other things would be missing, and for the life of me, I don't know how to get that part. And that's how I ended up in an MFA.
Oh, Robert, you mentioned reading, right? That's another great gift of being in an MFA program. It gave me a reading practice, even though I, loved books and read. I learned how to read so much more, and in a much more focused way. And I track my reading on Goodreads. I have now for the past almost 10 years now, and usually trying to do at least 40 books a year, which is a lot for me.
Wow.
But I think, don't go to an MFA program if you're not prepared to read. because that's what we do as writers. We got to read.
Right. And learn, right, exactly. And learning how to read like a writer, which is different, you know, like, you know, as we learn how to read and, you know, learn how to read to see how writers create structure and plot and, you know, characterization. Yeah. Yeah.
Karen, do you want to say a little bit more about reading like a writer? What does that really entail?
Well, I mean, I think what I would do before I took classes or before an MFA is I'd read a book and I would just think, how do they do this? It's so magical. How does a writer create this? And then I would learn about, say, specific detail or, you know, how do you create momentum or structure or conflict, and what's a scene versus summary, you know, just these words that are on the page, but then you don't know kind of what they are from the inside. So you learn more how they can become tools. And that is so fantastic.
Mm.
Yeah,
That's true.
And you learn to be less intimidated. So you're not just reading,
Yes.
wow, 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 I could never do that.
Right. You can.
So it can be empowering, right? That you're reading.
Totally empowering. Yeah, I totally agree. What are some other things? Oh, just a pause. Daryl's in the waiting room, but he can't get in. So
I emailed Sean,
okay, I did too.
but he may be off email.
Okay. So maybe we'll have to see. What we might have to do this again. I don't know, or I don't know.
I don't know. I thought it was
Let's
pretty
see.
good, actually.
Next, what are some other
Do we have a
things?
cell phone for Sean? Do we have a cell phone for Sean?
Yeah, let me call him.
Yeah,
I think I do have it.
yeah.
Oh,
call
you can. Oh, call him. Yeah, that's a good idea. What are some other
him.
things?
Girl is outside the room, but yeah, we can talk about, think of other topics while we're waiting.
Funding.
Oh, definitely funding. Yeah, especially if we don't want someone to go into debt.
Right.
And locations.
And location. Oh gosh, right. It's key.
A big issue now with Vermont changing.
Oh,
locations.
yeah. So, yeah, that's right. My gosh. Sean is not answering as well. Oh God, poor Daryl.
Hey, Sean, it's Robert. We lost Daryl and we need you to let him back in.
Oh God. Oh. Oh God.
Poor Daryl.
Oh God, it's terrible.
Like, note to Sean, like, make someone a host before you leave.
Right. Was I? No.
No, he didn't make any of us.
He didn't make anyone a host.
No. Karen, what is that behind you with all of the squares of light?
Oh, so there's two pieces of art. One, the top one is by my mom, it's a print, and the lower one is by Robert's sister, who took an art, got an art MFA actually at Hunter, and did these beautiful like flower pictures. This one broke. We have to get it reframed and removed, but it's so pretty.
Beautiful.
Isn't it pretty? Yeah.
It is.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Aha. Yay.
Hi.
Daryl, you're back.
Yes. So hang on. I'm going to get rid of.
Okay.
I was here by both phone and Zoom. Oh God, that was terrible.
Oh God. So is one of us host now in case that happens again?
Let's check the participants. That should list. No, Sean is still the host. So I don't know if we can make someone a co-host. No.
Yeah,
So the host has to make someone a co-host.
That's correct.
Okay.
But let's just continue as is because and see how it goes.
Okay.
So I left after making, or I don't know how much through the point I got about, is your program going to allow you to write 60,000 words of a novel or ask you to, tap out at 20?
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. So we're talking about all the different ways that programs allow you to focus on different genres or not, or can be siloed. But now what else? We're thinking about funding and then related to debt. That's a huge issue, huge issue. What would the directors, what would you say about funding, or what should students look for?
The thing about the low residency program is that you don't leave your job, right? So you are still working, and so that is, you know, a source of funding, your own savings. But low residency programs tend to have some funding, some more than others, and that can be a consideration that you're looking for, like, you know, and what are these scholarships based on? So are you able to apply for them and get them, or are there more general sources? So for example, we have that referral scholarship, like refer a writer, that anybody can get, like someone puts your name into the website and then you get, you know, $2,000 in that person's name. But yeah, that would be part of your research, right? Is to find out which programs offer that kind of funding.
So actually, there are a couple of guys, Marshall Moore and Sam Meekins, and they've got a string of anthologies, creative writing pedagogy, coming out with Bloomsbury. They had one out called The Place and the Writer that was out in 2021. And they have another one coming out that's, again, very, very, very international. And so I'm working on a chapter for that called The Funding Stories We Tell, Rewriting Creative Writing in the Academy for Funding. And so that's in part about faculty research, how, you know, how trying to have creative writing faculty research competing with scientists, et cetera, for funding. But to get to your question, Karen, about funding for students, so I just should add, in the Canadian context, there is a national funding body for prof and grad student work and research, and that's called the in English, the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, affectionately known as SSHRC. And so they do have scholarships for doctoral students and master's students. And theoretically, creative writing applicants are able to apply, and some of my students have won them. And it's pretty substantial funding, like $17,000 for 1 year of your master's. However, that to me is still one way in which we see what I still think of as a really manifest prejudice, where, you know, and again, so my PhD is actually in literature, so I can insult my own. So I find there's still a really vibrant snobbery where a lot of literature scholars don't regard creative writing research as research compared to writing about Jane Austen. And so I say that because in Canada, I've been on these juries deciding whether applicant A should get a national scholarship for a PhD versus applicant B. And invariably, the prejudice is still to have predominantly humanities profs, philosophers, historians, et cetera, saying that the so-called academic scholarly work deserves 3 years of national funding, whereas, oh, that person who wants to write even a research novel, well, it's just not as important. Invariably, there's that prejudice. And so there is, and also, though it is, again, a kind of genre question, although you will be submitting a writing sample, which will feature your wonderful creative writing, in part, and now we writers have advantages over, you know, painting applicants in that at least we write, but still, you know, invariably that contextualizing your work for a scholarship tends to favor a more rational mindset, a sort of argumentative mindset, you know, a sort of connection building mindset that might not necessarily be the skills set for a young fiction writer, poet, playwright, memoirist, et cetera.
That's true.
There are also two other sources of funding. If you're a veteran in the United States, the GI Bill will cover, can be used for graduate programming. We have a couple of veterans in our program. Also, and a lot of people don't realize this, if you work for a company, most companies do have tuition benefit programs where they will pay 50%, 75%, even 100% of any type of educational programming that you take on, depending on how it relates to your work. And I encourage people to look into this. I have a friend who got laid off from a corporation that she'd been in for 15 years, and she was thinking about what to do next. And she did not know that they had this tuition benefit program. You know, she was interested in an MFA and she could have done it ages ago, and she didn't realize this money was available to her. So look into it and just ask. You don't know what's out there.
Yeah, asking is really important. Yeah, absolutely. Now, one thing I would say is also just like funding versus where you are getting your MFA. I know when I was applying to MFAs, I got into Columbia and I got into Iowa, and I was deciding, and Columbia was in New York, where it was so expensive to live. It was a very high overhead. And I think like having a low overhead is really important. And they were like, here's like a few $1,000s, which wasn't going to cover their gigantic tuition. So then I went to Iowa where it was much lower, and then I got some aid, and, you know, it was just easier to do because it was less expensive. So I think just thinking about all those things as you're deciding how to make your life easy and low overhead so that you have the time to write, that you don't just be spending a lot of time getting money to pay the rent.
Now, am I making this up, or was my rent in Iowa City in that time about $250 a month?
Probably, yeah.
I think it was.
Yeah, I mean, then, yeah.
Then.
Yeah. You know, location is important for low residency programs too, because,
Yeah.
you know, I thought about Warren Wilson, you know, versus Vermont, but I could drive to Vermont. You know, I live in Connecticut. I could drive from, I would not have to pay for plane tickets and then thinking about, you know, where am I going to stay once I get someplace. So, so that's a consideration as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if anyone's watching this panel to seek funding, to maybe sharpen the stick in Sophronia's point, you know, a couple points. If you are trying to have your corporation fund a degree in a creative writing degree in an MFA in creative writing, remember that empathy is one of our big selling points, right? So ours is an education in social emotional intelligence, and so all of those ways in which you better read humans, of course, that makes for, you know, that's crucial to good creative writing. And we can tend to forget how valuable that is everywhere. And so, you know, I think, you know, good writing educations are good educations in being good humans. And so those are some of the practical spins you can put on your corporate application for funding. You know, I mean, honestly, you know, is an essay on Milton going to be as advantageous as you know, a short story about teen girls? I think, you know, you're going to learn more about writing the short story about teen girls that applies to so many careers than the article about Milton.
Other questions?
Well, how should we end? If there's one single thing to be thinking about as an audience member struggles with the MFA question, to go or not to go later, to wait. Timing is an interesting question. What would you suggest as the most important thing to think about?
Who do you want to be as a writer? You know, how do you want to show up in the world as a writer? Right? Is it, do you want to be in certain literary circles? Do you want to publish in a certain way? Do you want to, I don't know, do you want to be taken seriously? Right? All of these are questions around your identity as a writer, and thinking about what is going to help you get there. Right? And I say this from experience, because coming from a journalism world is even though, you know, well published in great magazines, is not the same as being involved in books and discussions of literature and writing in a certain way, right? And that was my thing, right? I wanted to be seen as a writer in a certain way, at a certain level, in a certain community, and I knew MFA was going to take me there.
So Sophronia, you're saying that you were, as a journalist, you were literature adjacent, but the MFA sort of allowed you access to the mores, the etiquette, the
Yeah.
imprimatur
Yeah.
of Literary Citizen.
Publishing in literary journals and such. Yeah, you'd be surprised. I have former colleagues who ask me, how did you do that? Because they see that I am in a different world now. Right. So it is a very specific switch. I would also say that after I published my first novel, and this is kind of what got me interested in teaching and talking about writing, I recognized that the writers that I met who seemed to be unhappy with their publishing experience were unhappy because they wanted one thing, but then went down a road that was in no way going to get them the thing that they wanted. But they didn't know that.
Yeah.
They just didn't know that. Because there are so many myths about what writing is and what publishing is, that we need an experience that will help us not only break down these myths, but to help us better understand what we want, right? And to empower a writer to make better decisions that will help them become the writers that they want to be in the world.
So using the MFA as a chance to think about career choice and the shape of a literary career.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
But to also see, if you want to be a certain writer, that this can be a path to that, right? So for some writers, they may not need the MFA to, if they want to self-publish, for example, right? And like you said, they may want to know just enough to help them with a certain project, right? They're working very independently, and they know that they are happy that way as a writer, right? So if you understand that, you're doing the thing that you want to do, and you wouldn't necessarily need an MFA, but it takes that understanding first and foremost to say, this is who I am and this is what I'm doing as a writer.
Robert, I'm glad that your question included the word wait, should you wait? And so I would say, ask yourself two questions. What do you want to learn? What do you want to learn in your writing MFA versus what are you ready to learn? Now, you can't always know what you're ready to learn, but in ways that's my indirect way of saying, do you really want to roll directly over from your undergrad into an MFA, especially when in the States, the MFA is in ways the terminal degree. And so in the Routledge book, probably the most significant creative writing prof in India is Saikat Majumdar, who studied in the US, has taught in the US, including at Stanford, but is now back in India, in his native India. And he dares to say he dares to utter the secret, are students really ready for an MFA when they're 21 or 22? I think one of the dirty little secrets is when you meet older students, they're less technically accomplished about where to put things where to put things when, but they learn that quickly. But they have more to say. They do have more to say, and I know this is a sort of ageist generalization, but I do think writing about the heartbreak when you were 17, yes, it's the only heartbreak it's very powerful, but starting to write about the heartbreaks when you're 27, people are getting left at the altar, there are unwanted or wanted pregnancies, the stakes do start to rise. And for a lot of people that are only going to do one graduate degree in creative writing, if you're only going to do the one degree, I would say maybe try to choose the right time in your life. So maybe have a job that you recognize is, not your ideal career job, work it for a couple of years, or maybe work internationally as a good missionary for capitalism, teaching English abroad. And then maybe it's time to write that thesis novel.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I've seen students get younger and younger, and also become paradoxically more and more technically adept, often because they've done a BFA in creative writing beforehand, that were a creative writing major. And yet not always, but often that readiness is not quite there.
It's interesting, Robert, when I was in college, I had a teacher. I started, when I realized that I could be a writer, I was in a nonfiction course, and I was thinking about doing a novel. And this teacher said to me, he said, you know, I would rather you not attempt a novel yet. He said, I'm concerned that you will try to do this, not finish it, and then not write again.
Hmm.
So I took that advice and waited until, you know, I think I was probably in my early 30s when I first embarked on a novel, when I had a story that I felt I could carry on for 300 pages. But I think he was right. You know, I think I was so gung-ho that I could not have produced something that would have worked at all, I think, at that point in my life.
It's interesting. Writers are the opposite of violinists.
Or
Say-
dancers, or
Yeah.
right. They can, yeah.
Expand, Professor Siegel. Keep going. Keep going.
Well, there are certain fields that put an emphasis on youth. Mathematics,
yeah.
I've read that brilliant mathematicians typically make their most powerful discoveries in their 20s. Whereas I think that's unusual in the writing world, to do your best work early. It happens, but age offers writers something. It's really true.
Yeah, it's only just a way of understanding the way the world works.
Yeah.
So so I was reading a novel for a friend who was much younger than I am, and he had this scene where the woman with her young lover, like something happens to her and she goes to the hospital, and they've run away, right? And I said to him, I said, you know, her husband, you know, works for a company. She's probably on his insurance. No way that she could be in this hospital and you wouldn't be getting information because you're not related to her. Like, just how does insurance work? You can't just walk into a hospital like this.
Right.
He didn't know that. He didn't know that because he'd never been married, never had to deal with insurance.
Oh God, wow.
Just practical things like that.
How, and you know, to really, to build on that, Sophronia, to really understand how the world works, you have to be bruised by the world. Not once, but a number of times. You have to walk in without your insurance card or with no insurance, and see what happens.
Right.
And then suddenly you understand, oh, insurance matters.
Right.
And Karen, let's hear from you about Robert's great sort of closing question. What do you want to learn from your MFA? Or?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think these are all great points. I think I have seen students get younger in certain programs, and sometimes that's okay. Sometimes they are really motivated and really want to say something. You actually have something to say. And sometimes it's just too soon, and the maturity just feels not quite there. So I think it varies. I do think it varies. I feel like do you feel like you want to take your writing seriously? I mean, although you can take your writing seriously outside of MFAs as well, definitely. But do you really want to take it seriously in a community? Do you want to commit to it in this way for 2 or 3 years? And really feel ready to find people to connect with and think about what you want to say. I feel like that's the thing that I see in students, that they're kind of like trying to figure out what they're going to say. And then when they start figuring that out, it's so thrilling. They come in and they think they're saying one thing and they start saying something else. And it's like, oh, this is what I want to say to someone else. And thinking of the arrow as a writer pointing to another person that is your reader, as opposed to pointing to yourself, which is, I think, sometimes as a young writer, a challenge. Yeah. But this was great. I guess any other thoughts, or we're pretty good?
Thank you, guys. It's been illuminating for me.
Yeah, this is great.
I really appreciated hearing your perspectives. It really, I feel like I learned a few things.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, well, speaking of, back to your first comments, Robert, about the tribe, it's nice to have an acceleration. So this was a little accelerated return to the tribe. So thank you. And I do apologize for the technical glitch where I was absent. I was on a walkabout.
Oh, we're editing all that out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I do have one last question, which is sort of random before we end. And it's actually for Daryl. How accessible are Canadian writing programs for United States students? Are they?
Yeah. Okay. So Very entirely accessible. They're just more expensive than what Canadians pay, but even without the exchange rate, which is favorable to Americans, we don't have, and this is a key fact, again, about life outside of America. I don't think any other country has the $85,000 master's program that America does, because in so many other countries, state funding is so crucial to your degree. And also though, like, whereas in the States, a Columbia degree is so much more expensive than, like, there's such a range, right? From $20,000 to $85,000. In Canada, the range is tiny. So the University of British Columbia is Canada's oldest MFA in creative writing. And it's not much more expensive to Canadians than Canada's youngest MFA in creative writing at the University of Saskatchewan. So that's a key fact. So generally though, because education in Canada is so heavily subsidized by the state, I think the normal working fraction is to triple the cost of what a Canadian pays. But that said, it would start to get expensive. But right now the American dollar is like, you usually get at least $1.25 Canadian for an American dollar. So that's going to work out. Unfortunately, now Canada does have the sort of rent issues that Karen was raising about New York City. So Vancouver is a very, very expensive city to live in. And then also, though, the University of Victoria, also in British Columbia, has an MFA in creative writing. So it's entirely viable. And we don't require the GRE that international applicants to America have. There are no national test scores you have to provide. If you were terrible at math, that's never going to be a problem getting into an MFA in creative writing in Canada. So they're entirely accessible. They're just more expensive than what Canadians pay, but that still might in some cases be more affordable.
Interesting. So might be an interesting option to explore.
Yeah. Or though, then again, a 2-year MFA or MA in Canada versus a 3-year PhD in Australia. I mean, to do things over again, I guess I'd go to Australia.
Interesting. Interesting. Wow. So many options.
Yeah.
Well, if that's it, I'll just do the final comment. Thanks again for joining us for the MFA Nation. We're so pleased you spent this time with us, and we hope the discussion has been helpful. Please be sure to check out 1455 Literary Arts at www.1455litarts.org to learn more about the organization and free programming offered throughout the year. Thanks again to all of you.
Thank you, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Pleasure to see you guys.
Nice meeting Karen and Sophronia.
Yeah, you all, Robert.
Yeah.
So
Take
fun
care.
to meet you. Take care. Bye, Daryl.
Bye, Robert. Bye, Ron.